There's really not much different as mankind reacts to things around us. Similar groups are alive and well today as they would have been then. Certainly some distinctions, but similar. We're ready for Matthew 23, verse 14, the second woe. And we contrast it with the second beatitude as we're going through looking at it in that regard. I don't want us to spend much time looking at the beatitude except to see that they're a good contrast. They work very well together in contrast. Matthew 23, verse 14, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you devour widows' houses, even while for a pretense you make long prayers. Therefore you shall receive greater condemnation." The beatitude that's contrasted is found in Matthew 5, verse 4. "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." It's not an exact match as the first one was, but it's certainly a response to other people's circumstances, and that woe gives us their response compared to what it ought to be. We're going to study the Beatitudes sometime next year, Lord willing. I call it God's people in an upside-down world. And we're going to approach them that way. It's upside down, the way God, through Christ, instructs us to live. But it will come on its own time. But I want to read something. It's an Arab proverb that I found a number of years ago, and I've come to not only believe that it's factual in its representation, but I believe it teaches us something. The proverb says, "All sunshine makes a desert." All sunshine makes a desert. Now that just tells us that life has difficulty even when there could be a lot of good in it. Sunshiny days are a blessing to a lot of people. But if you live in a place that's 120 degrees, though it may be low sweat, low humidity, when it's 120 degrees, it's hot. And humidity makes it worse. But all sunshine makes a desert. But here's a poem by Robert Browning Hamilton that I want us to begin thinking about before we look at what's said to the Pharisees. "I walked a mile with pleasure. She chatted all the way, but left me none the wiser for all she had to say. I walked a mile with sorrow, and ne'er a word said she, but oh, the things I learned from her when sorrow walked with me." When we go through times of mourning, we learn so much about ourselves. And we usually are more longing for and dependent upon God. It's as if we've got to go through a hardship to appreciate the good times and long for that which God provides for us in those difficult times. Pleasure, not so much. Life is just good all the time. Maybe there's not time to slow down to learn lessons. We're having too much fun. It's too enjoyable. But sorrow teaches us much. I heard a story, and I've found it to be true firsthand. You have too. But I heard it from others before I experienced it. I wasn't aware of it as strongly. But a person went into a funeral home. He didn't want to be there. He was uncomfortable, but he knew he needed to be there. And he walked up to the family that had experienced the loss. Doesn't remember saying much at all. He didn't know what to say. He just didn't know what to say in that circumstance. But he was there. He was there beside them. He was there listening, but standing there with them. And later, a few days, he received a note. And it was saying, "Thank you so much for being there. What you did meant so much." Now, what does that tell us? What did he tell us when he shared that firsthand experience? Being there is important. Having the right words doesn't matter. Now, we can say words. We can say certain things. I've developed a pretty thick training manual, if you will, 3 times this thickness, on caregivers. It's an instructional manual that I've used occasionally with certain subjects often to kind of tell us what to say and what not to say, how to approach certain things that come up in our life. And it's teaching others how to be better at caregiving. But one of the things you don't say in the time of mourning is, "So this is God's will." It's not God's will that a 3-year-old get run over by a car. I'm just picking an example. That's not God's will. To say it is just not helping. You can say, "I'm sorry for your loss." You can say, "God cares about you," or something. But sometimes the worst thing you can say is, "God's will. God just needed to call her home." That's not necessarily at the top of anyone's list for a 9-year-old with something tragic that's happened. It's not God's will that evil reign. It's His sovereignty of letting choices have a natural consequence, but that's not His will. He would not have chosen that, but He allows choices to be made that have consequences. But I'm saying that to say this: we learn so much when we are in those settings of mourning with people. And we'll say more about it at a later time. We don't know much about why Jesus said what He said in verse 14. Barclay, who gives us as much as anybody I'm aware of that would interpret the teachings, the lifestyles of Judaism and the Pharisees, didn't offer much in his writings. What do we know from verse 14? Let's be sure we see what he does tell us, and then let's learn the lesson. He calls them hypocrites. So they're pretending something that's not real. They're putting forth a false face or a false front. That's for certain. He says, "You devour widows' houses." So somehow, as spiritual leaders, they have involved themselves in the lives of widows in their environment. And he accuses them, he charges them with devouring widows' houses. Now, we don't understand exactly what that entailed, except that apparently he did not treat them right, he did not treat them well, and it affected the way that they were cared for. Now, if we take it with the earlier verses of Matthew 23 of declaring Corban, if they gave people the excuse by declaring their possessions and their wealth Corban devoted to God, and that removed the obligation of honoring father and mother, it could apply to a mother who's now a widow. And we can see how that very well could be part of that. People have ignored the command of God. They've developed a tradition, if you will, and they're not taking care of people as they should. And the word devour is suggested that not only did you take it away, but you don't give it back. You're not providing what you should be providing. And it's widows. There's no question about that. Devouring widows' houses. Even while for a pretense you make long prayers. Now, I am guilty of what I'm about to share with you, and my guess is so are you. It's not our intent. It's not our intent at all. But when someone gives us a circumstance, or it's written in a bulletin or made as an announcement, our thought is, I'll pray for them. I'll pray for you. And sometimes they'll ask us, now, Gary, I want you and Terry to pray for me and pray for us. And we say, we will. And time passes, and we've done it occasionally, but not nearly to the extent that we intended. We don't pray for people the way we intend with our busy lives. That there's a point metaphorically that with the list that some of us have in our congregations, you can say, God, I want to pray for all of those on this list. You don't mention it by name. God knows the name. He knows the persons. He knows the situations better than we do. But here, there apparently is a long prayer suggesting something that proved to God to be a pretense. You're saying words, but there's nothing behind it that some would suggest. Again, this is the New American Standard. Even while for a pretense you make long prayers. Now, the long prayer made them look spiritual. The prayer shawls showed their spirituality. So the prayers speak for themselves. The length of them tells us something that they abused. I want to say something that I don't intend for it to come out as strongly as it might, so I want to be careful. But I know sometimes a church building, through the church secretary, will get a phone call from someone and they'll say, would you ask the congregation to pray for someone? And they'll give us the name and information. People we don't know, but they'll say this, I just want as many people praying as possible. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not suggesting there is. But I'm also suggesting that the number of people praying doesn't deter God from answering that prayer. Or it doesn't convince Him, if you will. The prayer of a righteous man availeth much. But a corporate group of people praying, a large number of people praying matters to people. They want to have that support. I remember Bush in those first years of George W. saying that I have felt the prayers of the world. I've felt the prayers being offered on my behalf. And I really think he was hated more because of that. To show his faith in any way is going to reveal darkness contrasted to light. But when people are praying for us, we feel the power of those prayers. Here, a long prayer, acknowledged, but as far as God was concerned, it was a pretense. He didn't mean it. Words without meaning. And it related to houses and the circumstances of the widows of the area. And he said, therefore, it's a conclusion. When Terry and I were first married, we were at a congregation, and Danny, the minister, would come to this word many times in the New Testament. He says, now when you see the word therefore, see what it's there for. And I used to say, oh, Danny, quit saying that. I'm tired of hearing it. And yet I found myself saying it over and over myself because it's a teaching point. And he knew it. And he was a good teacher. What's the therefore? Why is it there? Because if you are in the circumstance just described, you shall receive greater condemnation. There may be condemnation leveled against you, but because of what's just been said about them, hypocritical, devouring widows' houses. They weren't supportive and supporting as they should have. Maybe even using their traditions to withhold help that caused widows to lose their houses. We don't know for certain. But there's a pretense in the long prayer, and it will bring a greater condemnation. So there's no question what he's saying to them. I want us to turn to a scripture, and if you think of additions, I want you to help me with them, and let's bring them out. I'll repeat what you say when that time comes. 1 Timothy 5 gives us some instructions. Timothy tells us that he's going to give us the instructions as it relates to God's household, as it relates to the church, which is the household of God, the family of God. And he gives us specific instruction. I don't know of a single congregation that follows this instruction in the way that it's given, but yet I think many of us have been and are at congregations that have the need acknowledged and addressed. But let's let Paul talk to us first. 1 Timothy 5 verse 3, honor widows who are truly widows. In other words, it's people who have lost a husband, and it's accurate. It's not something that's been contorted, if you will. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to show godliness to their own household and to make some return to their parents, for this is pleasing in the sight of God. So we're talking about widows who are truly widows. There's no question about it. What's the first line of defense as far as meeting their needs? Children. The family. Yes. If they have children or grandchildren, then it's their responsibility. We're paraphrasing it, but that's what he said. They're to learn to show godliness to their own household and to make some return to their parents. And it's implied because he said grandchildren, grandparents. We have a responsibility to our parents and our grandparents to where their needs are met, physical as well as spiritual. So she who is truly a widow, left all alone, and again, without children, grandchildren, has set her hope on God and continues in supplications and prayers night and day. And so he's describing someone who's spiritually minded, who acknowledges God in her life, and she's a prayerful person, day and night. And that's not suggesting that if she's not praying at 3 in the morning, she's not fulfilling what this verse is saying. It's not suggesting that. But she's a prayerful woman. But she who is self-indulgent is dead even while she lives, the ESV says. What does it mean? There are some widows that aren't spiritually minded. There's some widows who aren't leaning on God. They're not prayerful. He's going to say some stronger things in a minute. But she's concerned about self, and there's a need to be concerned about herself, but it's done in the sight of God. And command these things as well, so that they may be without reproach. So there may be a need for elders to go visit a widow and say, you need to stop some things or do some things that are important for you as a spiritual person in this life circumstance. If anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. we're going to make a comment Sunday week that this principle that's used here is used. How can you be worse than an unbeliever before God? What can be worse than an unbeliever? In our thinking, what could be worse? This. This makes you before God worse than even an unbeliever if you don't provide for your relatives. What does that mean? Well, both of them aren't very good positions before God, but there is a worse. There's a degree, if you will. There's a degree. We're not comfortable with that, but the Scriptures teach us that in heaven. There's degrees of punishment and degrees of reward. To him who's been given much, much will be required. Those who are given less, less will be required. There's some degree of obligation or responsibility or accountability. But what could be worse before God than an unbeliever? This. That's all I know to say. God sees that this is worse. But what's that telling us? This is important. This is important. Now, we've begun teasing our 3 children. As we're getting older, and we were together for Thanksgiving except for one daughter-in-law, first time in 5 years. We missed it. We want to avoid that as much as possible in coming years. But we've begun teasing them from time to time. Now, we're going to be really nice to you when you come to visit. What do you like to eat? What's your favorite dessert? We're going to be really nice to you because we're going to need you down the road. And they just look at me, and what do they say? Oh, Dad. Oh, Dad. What you feed me today is not going to change how I want to take care of you later. I've made it known, I think it's probably factual, that I look to die before Terry. I'm diabetic. Her parents have all lived 90 to 100. All of her relatives just celebrated her aunt's 96th birthday. So I've made it real clear, I expect to die before Terry. But Terry, I want you to promise me that you won't stay by yourself when you've got 3 children that will want you to come be with them. And then they get into a mini argument. Oh, I want her for 4 months. I want her for 4 months. I want her for 4 months. I don't want her to go to Tanya's for 2 or 3 years and us never see her. We'll take her 4 months each. Well, I just love hearing that because I want Terry to be provided for when I'm not there. But it's something that needs to be teased about, I think. And it needs to be instructed in however it needs to be, so that our children realize this is important to us, but it's important to God. It's part of God's plan. And I think I've shared with you on another occasion the conversation I had with Terry's 89-year-old father in Ohio when he and his wife weren't comfortable after a couple of years. They just didn't feel like we should have the burden of caring for them. Here's what I told him as nicely as I could. Batzel, Terry's always been the one of your 5 children that has wanted to do this, and it's assumed she will be the one to do it. Now, you understand, if she didn't want you here, you wouldn't be here. And I smiled real big. But you go tell Louise that this is God's plan. This is what God planned. And we're glad you're here. We want you here. And they stayed with us 6 years until the last year, and then they were both gone fairly quickly, it seemed. But it's God's plan. And we need to teach it in our congregations, and we need to repeat it in our homes. And we don't need to feel guilty for it. It's God's plan. But let's go on. Let a widow be enrolled if she is not less than 60 years of age, having been the wife of one husband, and having a reputation for good works, if she has brought up children, has shown hospitality, has washed the feet of the saints, has cared for the afflicted, has devoted herself to every good work. this is telling us that churches ought to have a widow's list. And it's based on credentials, a life of service to others. Now, whether it's officially written down, it needs to be, churches need to be aware of it. Age matters, service matters, but refuse to enroll younger widows, for when their passions draw them away from Christ, they desire to marry and so incur condemnation for having abandoned their former faith. Sometimes a widow early in life can make decisions based on those circumstances that's acknowledged and can take them outside of service, if you will. They become more self-serving, it seems to be saying. Besides that, they learn to be idlers, going about from house to house. Not only idlers, but also gossips and busybodies, saying what they should not. So he's giving us a picture of a younger widow that the church should not feel so obligated toward, or else instruction given so that you can feel better about your support for them. Some have strayed away from Satan, verse 15. Looking at the other side quickly. We'll not stay here any longer, but what it's saying, God cares about widows. He cares about it to the extent that churches need to have them on their mind, and leaders need to be mindful of their needs. And sometimes it may involve going to talk to family and encouraging them to fulfill their responsibility in case they haven't or don't realize it. And treat your children nice so they'll want you around when you need them more. It's up to us to make it a pleasant situation. Comments before we leave. I want to address something that Roddy asked me last week before we leave this one. But Roddy, you asked a comment.
I read somewhere that true hypocrite, someone who is actually doing something for hypocritical reasons,
Yeah.
knows what they're doing, they intend to do it, and they know that what they're doing is wrong.
Yeah.
You and I will be hypocritical accidentally.
Yeah.
It's not a way of life.
Yeah.
But a true hypocrite, and that's what Christ is addressing.
Right. Yeah.
These Pharisees knew exactly what they were doing.
Yeah.
But they were doing it for self-gain.
And Roddy made the comment that when you look at a true hypocrite, they know exactly what they're doing. They plan it. They follow upon those plans. They know what they should do. They put on a mask. That's the definition. They wear a mask. But they're putting on that mask to deceive people, not knowing what they really are. They're trying to deceive people, but they know. And that's true. I think that would be true of any person who would analyze that principle. It's not an accident. We all say and do things that we don't intend. I heard a number of years ago of someone, this is supposed to be a true story, they wanted so badly to do something in the Thanksgiving season to benefit others, and they didn't know what to do. They lived in a big city. They got on a subway. They didn't know that many people, but they wanted to do something that mattered. So they bought a turkey, put it in a sack, and had it at the office ready to give to a stranger on the subway going home. So that's the setup for the story. How what happened, I can't explain, but it apparently did. Somehow the person picked up the wrong sack and gave them something that was not intended, and it wasn't positive. He had good intentions, but his follow-through was lacking. He wanted to do something to help someone else. There are times where we'll mess up greatly, but it's not our intention. We're not planning it to look good when we know we're anything but. But again, these were called hypocrites by the one who knew the heart and knew them, and the statements are very strong. We have time to probably do the next one because it's nothing that's based on a specific thing, but more of a wide open principle. Verse 15, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you travel about on sea and land to make one proselyte. And when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourselves." The beatitude that's contrasted, "Blessed are the gentle," or the meek, "for they shall inherit the earth." Inheriting the earth by your humbleness, your meekness, gentleness, those three words are synonymous depending on their application, their context. But here is that same group of religious leaders of that day working hard, traveling over sea and over land to make one proselyte. And yet what you've done is made them twice the son of hell as you. What's a proselyte? A proselyte is someone that you convince, you teach, however it comes about. You bring them to your belief system. You convert them. In Judaism, there were two kinds of proselytes. There is a proselyte of the gate, G-A-T-E, a proselyte of the gate would be converted to Judaism, stricter Judaism, and they would offer sacrifices, they would observe the Sabbath, they would be converted to much of the old law, and they would seek to follow it. The proselyte of the gate. There's a proselyte of righteousness that went one step further. They would even go so far as to be circumcised. A proselyte of righteousness would do the other, sacrifices, Sabbath, other things, but they would even also yield to circumcision, though not Jewish. They would take on Judaism to that extent. Who traveled sea and land to try to tear up the church, get a bill or the authority to go to other cities and drag them back to Jerusalem, hoping to have them imprisoned? Who did that? Saul. So we can understand someone who's zealous and wrong. And he said, in my ignorance, I did it. And I'm the greatest of sinners, he said, because of it. But when he found out he was wrong, he was just as fervent to seek to convert people to Jesus Christ, to convert them from Judaism to Christianity, to proselyte them, if you will. That's not a word we use. We use the word converting, but it's the same principle. And the Pharisees would travel sea and land to proselyte people into their outlook of Judaism. We have to say that because of what we've already seen in Matthew 23. They many times put traditions over God's commands. And so when you proselyte someone with false teaching, commands of God are thought of less and traditions more, sometimes nullifying God's commands, what have you done? To me, the only way I can describe it is if you make someone twice the son of hell as you, you've put them first in equality with yourself because they adhere to your teachings. If you're a son of hell, false teacher, and you've denied the Messiahship, remember last week they denied Jesus as the Son of God. They accused him of sinning when he wasn't. I think we had a list of 7 things that the Pharisees leveled against Jesus, discouraging others from wanting to follow him, accusing him of loving sinners as if he shouldn't. But if you convert someone to believe what you believe, the only way I know to explain it is you have put someone between that person and God. So it's double hard for them to find God again or to know the teachings that God would have them learn, because they bounce everything as twice the son of hell against what you've taught them. It's not like they can turn to Scripture and see what it teaches. They have to turn to you and Scripture, and you've nullified Scripture. So you've put a wall between them and God. That's the best way I know to express what I think he's saying. Because the son of hell is the son of hell. How to be twice? Well, you've put yourself between that person's belief and God's teachings. And it's doubly hard to change them. It's doubly hard to change a person that has a lot of confidence in somebody. And it's deep and runs over a period of time. And at some point, you just sometimes will say, I just don't believe what you're saying because so-and-so, and you'll name that person because they haven't told me that, or they haven't taught me that, or they don't believe that. You refuse to listen, not to a teaching supposed from God, because you are adhering to another teacher, another person that you respect. And there's nothing wrong with respecting teachers and depending upon them and trust them and making phone calls to ask them questions. But at some point, they can become a barrier if you listen so much to them and God's Word isn't at the forefront. Now, if they're teaching with God at the forefront, that's not what I'm describing. But if they're teaching their application or their interpretation, they become a barrier. And I think that's what he's suggesting. Roddy asked me a good question last week at the end of class, and we both agreed, I'm not sure we have an answer. Where were the priests in all of this? We know in the study of John the Baptist, Zacharias was only on priestly duty as far as the most holy place maybe once in his lifetime. It was 24/7, 365 annually. Every minute had to be accounted for. And so a temple had many people assigned to it who were priests. They were priests. Where were they? The only answer I had, have you thought of another one? I've thought about it this week. My initial response was they were in the temple. They were performing their functions in the synagogue. And Jesus was in and out of those places. He went to Jerusalem 3 times in his ministry. He went the required 3 times, but he was in and out of the city. And he would very often go in the synagogues, and on occasions he would take the scroll and he would read from it, and then he would interpret, or on one occasion, he who has just been read about, Isaiah 53, I'm him. And he really drew their wrath, the Pharisees in the synagogue where the priests were present. Nothing I know tells me that the ones that we consider the priests were part of this ill group of people that are being chastised. Scribes, Pharisees, Sadducees talked about in some regards, but not what we think of as the priest who served in the temple. And that's the only answer I could give. The 2 people that I would depend upon to send them a quick note and get a response are no longer alive. So I thought this week, who can I contact? And I thought of a few as the class got closer this week that I can implore them. How would you answer that question? But we can fulfill the command to seek and save the lost unless we're teaching them our opinions that puts us between them and God. And we're not doing them a favor if we do that. We need to be chapter and verse, and they need to see us with chapter and verse. And we need to state an opinion as an opinion to be sure they understand it. This is what I think it's telling us. This is how I would interpret the words of God, to where we can understand them based upon the context, the culture, who's he writing it to, compared to maybe that doesn't apply to us. I'm not a widow, so it wouldn't be, there's some things that wouldn't be describing me. He's not talking about gender when he's talking about someone who's a male, an ener, which is male specific. But the point is, we need to share our opinions and be sure it's taught that way, understood that way. And have you ever changed your opinion about a scripture? You looked at a set of scriptures and 10 years later you saw it differently? Does that befuddle you for me to ask such a question? Shake your head like this, I hope, because you're going to grow in knowledge and understanding and wisdom. I hope you see things easier, more clearly, slightly different maybe, than you did as a 20-year-old if you're in your 50s. Does that mean suddenly you're going to wish that baptism and instruments and some of those things were changed? I'm not suggesting that. There are some things that probably you were taught. They're somewhat specific. They're clearer than other things. But it's very likely that you have changed your thinking on some things. Your understanding is richer as a result of it. I was teaching a class. I'll close with this because the kid's going to come in. I was teaching a class early in my adult years. We graduated from MTSU and moved back to Chattanooga for 7 years. Terry taught. I was a sports writer. And we worshiped at the congregation where my dad was an elder and I had grown up from 6th grade on. And I was teaching an adult class, and I made the comment when Mary and Martha came to Jesus after he on purpose stayed away from Bethany so Lazarus could die and be in the tomb to make his clear point. Mary and Martha both said to him, "Lord, if you'd been here, you could have done something." They had been thinking it probably hundreds of times in those 2 days. But they said it. If you'd been here, you could have done something. And the mourners had been hired, lots of mourners there, the Jewish culture. And when Jesus walked up, it tells us that he was troubled in his spirit and Jesus wept. We highlight Jesus wept. People mourning about death caused him to weep. He shed tears. They weren't constant flowing of tears like the ones when he came into Jerusalem in that last week. And he shed tears there, and it was more of a flowing of tears. But I made the observation, if you look at what we're told that we sometimes don't see, it said he was troubled in spirit. The word there means that he was angered. He was slightly angered in spirit to see what death was doing to people. What did he say about death? It's an enemy. It's the last enemy that's conquered. And it troubled him to the extent that it also angered him a little bit to see what Satan and death were doing to people. And this person I've known all of my adult life said, "Gary, I've never heard about that. I don't believe it." And I says, "Richard, is it possible that you may have heard something new that you could believe?" And he kind of laughed because he realized what he'd done. "Because you're the guy who grew up here, why should I believe you? And I've never heard that before." Well, sometimes we can not listen and learn, but sometimes we listen, take opinion, and make it fact. And that's what I'm encouraging us to realize. Thank you.